Good day, everyone, and welcome
Hello,
to the Wheels Up Live podcast. I'm IAD Bound,
and I'm Felix.
and we are actually on today as a recorded event because we have a very special guest today, and we want to accommodate his schedule. So we're recording this a couple days ahead of time for your Sunday viewing. And our special guest today is going to be none other than Black Box 711. So we're very
excited.
much looking forward to that conversation with him. But as always, we have our news of the week, and there are, of course, been a few stories since our last podcast, as there always seem to be. And the first one today is from AnyBuilds. Monday was a pretty big day for AnyBuilds, and they had a developer stream, and in the days that have followed, they've added on to that. And sort of one of the key pieces out of the development stream was they talked a lot about the history of AnyBuilds and what they're doing now and the processes that they use and how the team has evolved and expanded. And as a lot of you know, it's gotten very big. Well, one of the other elements of that was a little teaser at the end, which was a couple of images of none other than the A350. And you might remember we had a couple of pictures on Sunday. Since then, they have put out a teaser video. And needless to say, we're going to share the teaser video with you now.
Introducing the AnyBuilds A350 Airliner for Microsoft Flight Simulator, the ultimate airliner experience.
It looks good. I think I could have done without the electronics made.
We gotta have that. Come on, it's the A350.
Oh, that was the most exciting thing for me is they're going to have the Delta livery. That's all that kind of matters, personally.
And they had some sounds in here, which surprised a lot of people. A lot of people were not expecting to hear any sounds in this teaser.
Yeah.
Well, Felix, you have seen many a product launch. What's your reaction?
I mean, I think they're trying to establish themselves. It looked good. I mean, here's what we can say. It sounded good. It looked good. The when the battery comes on and you hear it go on the bus, the external power and everything, and the aircraft power's on, you hear that clunk. Very, very classic. It reminds me of we were kind of talking about this earlier, the FS Labs, which I think has a really fantastic sound set, one of the best. And it that it had that same clunk. I've never been in an Airbus cockpit. I've been in a couple of Boeings, never an Airbus. But that sound just was really good. Like I don't know why I'm fixated on that one sound, but that one sound was just fantastic, right? I mean, it looks great. They were showing off a couple of stuff. It's very much work in progress. They had a FAQ,
yes,
which is in there. If you are on their channel or you go on their forum, it's there. They have it linked. There's a couple of important things to note. There's going to be the ULR. So the ULR is the variant that has the basically the highest maximum takeoff weight, structural weight. And only Singapore has it, I think, at this point. I think Qantas wants to do it for Project Sunrise, but that's going to be included for free, but it's going to be an update. They are going to have brake to vacate. They are going to have ROPS. They're going to have a fully integrated ACAR CPDLC suite. They said something about that there's something they're wanting to add that we may not have seen before, at least from them. So just kind of looking to see. So there's a lot of excitement around it.
Oh,
I think, and we've had some conversations, offline about how I think AnyBuilds is trying to establish this specific product as a new benchmark for them in terms of fidelity. I think that's why they show the electronics. But for me, if it's going to ruin perf, I'm hoping there's a toggleable option for it. I don't need to be in the E&E bay. I'm not a maintenance worker. I don't do flight sims to simulate maintenance work. So it's just not something that, I'm okay. Yeah, sure. That's cool. The chances of a pilot going down there are nil. But it's cool that they want to do that. It's cool they want to do a fully done cargo bay. I don't think 3D art has ever been their kind of weak point. I think that's always been a strong suit for them.
Yeah.
But we have to really wait and see. And one point I've been wanting to make is just, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't think any sim currently is really, I don't want to use the term worthy, but it's really not up to task with how amazing this aircraft is. The A350 just as an aircraft is kind of a generational leap, especially from the pilot, interaction piece.
Sure.
It's really a generational leap in capability. For instance, the onboard information system, the OIS, runs off of a custom Windows 10. Which you can't really replicate properly. We have brake to vacate, which is this really cool thing that came out on the A380 and they put in the A350, which basically allows you to kind of set the auto brakes to where, I want to get off at this high speed. It will set the auto brakes to give you the rate to make that high speed exit, right? So you can almost like predictively use it. It accounts for wet runways, contamination, that sort of thing, right? The ROPS system, right? And more my point is that, a lot of these sims don't really have the ground effects of like what a contaminated runway, operates like with regards to the aircraft and, the landing performance and the kind of considerations you have to take in there. The wet runway.
Austin better not hear you say that.
I mean,
I'm just saying. No, I understand. Right? Is it a plane so far advanced in what it actually does in the real world that the sim needs to catch up to the plane and not the other way around?
And the other thing that Scott's got, who's a good friend of mine, and we were talking in voice, it's a boring plane. Like, yeah, it's cool, A350. It's boring. There's literally, you're just going to get to cruise and that's it.
Well, people say that about, they say that about the 777, or they've said.
But my point is this is like 30 times the aircraft the 777. That's my point. Like, what are you going to, this? I think people are going to get it, and there's going to be hype, and I think it's going to be received well. And I'm really hoping that it's high fidelity, because for my opinion, the only litmus test we have is the flight factor, and that's not really an A350.
No.
So
no, it's not.
And it's just one of those things that this is an aircraft that deserves to be done with a high degree of fidelity. And I guess my point is, like, they have the vertical situation display that has the weather, right? So you can see the tops and bottoms of potential threats, and you're not going to be able to utilize that. And so I guess for me, it's kind of one of these things. It's like, or maybe in 2024, that's something that we haven't seen yet. And that could be in that sim. But, as it stands right now, like, what sim can really kind of like fully realize the capabilities of an A350?
I think that's those are all excellent questions, and a lot of them are open questions. They're all pending, so to speak. I would say that I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is going to be a Microsoft 2024 product. If you look at the way the FAQ is set up, it's plainly suggesting that this is a Microsoft flight simulator product without being version specific. Whether or not there'll be a 2020 version or only a 2024 version, for example, they're not saying. I'm not particularly sure that it matters tremendously if there are both, as long as they do want to do it well. I got to think with AnyBuild's expanded relationship with Microsoft and Asobo that perhaps they are taking into account what they anticipate to be either new capabilities of 2024 or maybe just hoping, and that they will integrate those where they can, and where they can't, hopefully they'll explain that. I think one of the major challenges, besides all of the obvious things, with respect to the systems or what the sim can do, and just whether it's modeling the complexities of the onboard information systems, new FMC stuff, all of those kinds of things, or McDo, whatever, but I think one of the things that is going to be a big challenge is that the A350 is not an aircraft to which the average or virtually any simmer has any real resources to learn.
Sure.
Right now. They're when you look at it, because an A320, a 737, there's a lot of ways to learn how to get acclimated with the plane. And once you've learned some of those, you can take it to the 319, the 321. Some of the 737 stuff will work just fine in the 777 or the 747. And it's still an Airbus, but there are a lot of changes, and there are some philosophy differences, and it's a complex aircraft. And I think one of the big challenges, if I'm somebody like any build, is how do I actually get someone flying the plane, because I can't hand them the FCOM material. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that. I have some idea of how they're going to do it, I think, but we'll see what actually comes to fruition. And maybe there's some real world A350 pilots out there who will end up streaming or doing something to get people acclimated to that. Well, so in addition to the A300, the A350, they also talked about a little bit about the A300 Epic mod. And that's going to be a paid add-on to the A300. Now, as we talked about the other day, the A300 just got a big update. Performance was one of the things that they improved. It varies from system to system, but there's a good 5 FPS out there or more for a lot of people, sometimes more. I understand that they've seen some people who've seen much bigger jumps. They talked about in their developer stream that some people are saying 20 frames sometimes. Depends on your system. Just goes to show you that the variations can be significant. I'm not that familiar with the Epic mod, really, so I'm sort of interested to see what that brings about. I know you know a little bit more about that than I do, but
it's basically just it's just an EFIS upgrade, and I think there's some other FM CDU, upgrades as well. So it's a EFIS CDU, and it might be a flight management system upgrade. Somebody can correct me if I'm out there, but I know it's definitely the CDU itself and the EFIS. So you go from having the kind of 70s, 80s hybrid cockpits, where you had some steam gauge, and then you had the primary flight display, nav display, and then maybe you have an ICAS. So like in the 767, it's basically 3 columns, right? So you have primary flight display, nav, then you have upper lower ICAS, and then you have the FOs repeated in the A300. The difference being that it's like basically right above each CDU. Essentially, that all gets replaced. Well, no, not all of it. The primary flight display and then the CRTs, those get replaced, and the whole front glare shield panel gets replaced with just screens. To go with it. Right. And so it replaces that. It replaces the CDU. I know for FedEx, there's a little different thing with the HUD. But I don't think that's related. But again, it's going to replace what you're looking at as far as like instrumentation. That's going to go away. It's going to be replaced with a more kind of modern style of EFIS. The kind of big thing with it is they said it's only going to be a 2024 release. That it's not going to be for 2020. So I don't know if the product itself is going to be. I'm sure it's going to be a free expansion into 2024. I don't imagine that any builds is, going to charge probably, especially with their early access. They may, if it's a lot of work. And that's another thing, kind of caveat. Any of these products that are going to 2024, there are no guarantees that they are going to be free updates. And that includes scenery. The only thing that's going to be free are the people that update their freeware sceneries on FS2. That's literally all that's going to be free, or their mods or whatever. And so Epic mod, again, 2024, it's a complete flight deck redo. to kind of more modernize the aircraft, give the pilot a little bit more concise way to view information as they're flying.
Come on, the A300's fine the way it is. Let's just leave it be. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, if you talk to some people, that's exactly how they feel, right? In fact, they're more working for the Just Flight, right? They want they want zero. Right. Any sort of glass at all, no CRT, nothing. They want just straight analog steam gauge. That's their bread and butter. So
right, exactly. No, I think that's right. So we'll move quickly through our last couple of stories here. We have some updates from PMDG. They just did a 777 update the other day. That smoothed out some more stuff, worked on some more sounds, external modeling, all kinds of things like that. But one of the other things they dropped in there was that the freighter variant is quote unquote almost in beta, and then they threw a little bone in there that they had started working on the 747 in January, whatever that means. So right, we'll see.
It means December, Christmas present for Randazzo, please.
Not a chance. We won't even. I don't think we're going to even have every 777 variant by the end of the year. The way things are going.
No, not even close. Yeah.
And then just a couple of quick Microsoft notes. They had a developer stream the other day, just so people know. They're and I think you've probably seen this. One is that for those that are interested in the dual jetways, that's not going to be at launch. They're looking into that. It might come, not coming at launch. But one thing that is badly needed and will be in the new version is plane-specific hardware profile options, including the options for developers to create profiles for various hardware ahead of time. So sure. My sincere hope to that is that for the 10,000 people that ask how to get the reversers working in every airliner, that the developers figure that out for them. Please. Thank you.
I just use MaxReverse. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use MaxReverse, the airline that
but even how you turn it on.
Use. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, because it's all different. But no, I think the control profiles thing is something that's badly needed, because the one thing I love about X-Plane, and there are some of these kind of quality of life X-Plane wins. Like I said, I don't think X-Plane as a sim is better. I think there's a lot of quality of life things, but I also think that's a byproduct of X-Plane being around for 25 plus years, right? Yep. So they've had a lot of time to hone their UI and focus on that, whereas Asobo has had 4 years to make a simulator. Right. So I think there's a time disparity. But one of the beautiful things about X-Plane is the auto selecting of aircraft profiles. That's fantastic. Right. I love it. I don't even have to. I just set it, forget it. Right? You don't even have to worry. You hop in whatever aircraft. If you're like me, you have a Honeycomb Bravo. You just make sure that you have whatever levers, throttles, whatever, and you're good to go.
Right. So, but it's going to be
fantastic.
So, and I think we're excited about that. I've got one other tidbit, which is there's a new hardware maker coming. This is somebody who we know, who's involved particularly in the AeroWinks community, which is the AeroWinks PSX 747, but started making hardware now. And the company is called Nor Air Labs. And one of the things that they're making is this. So this is a customized switchboard, which each of these little panels inside of it is a custom module. So if you wanted that to say, nav and beacon and other things on it, which you have options, you can get them done that way. You can buy a default one. There's a number of options coming. They've also got some other hardware that they're working on. It's something we're going to feature more here on this channel as they're working through it. One of the things I know they're working on is some throttles that look very interesting. This stuff is metal. Right. I mean, there's some plastic too, of course, but the main frame is that you're seeing there is metal. They're building to a high standard. I think it's going to be some very interesting products to check out, and we'll put a link down to their website in the description for today's podcast. Well, okay, all right. We sort of rushed through that at the end because. Why? Well, because we have an amazing guest with us today, and we want to get him on.
Yeah, that's right.
So we would like to now welcome to the show Black Box 711. You all know him as one of the major streamers out there, covering virtually every aircraft on every platform. And he is incredibly generous to this community. And we're thrilled to have him join us today. Black Box, welcome.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for putting up with our news segment.
No, all good. I find it interesting. So it gives me the chance to catch up with the latest news as well. So nice.
Well, I guess we could ask you, since we did the news segment, before we jump into your great aviation history and all that, any builds A350, first reactions?
I kind of have to say I'm on the same side as you have commented. It's definitely going to be an interesting aircraft, so something that fascinates people from a technological standpoint. However, it'll be difficult to find documents, get procedures, checklists, and so on, and get some more detailed information. Also, I'm completely on the same side regarding the E&E compartment. Right? I'm not a mechanic. I don't really care too much about these things. I find it fascinating, and I admire the mechanics for their knowledge and so on. But yeah, for me, if in a flight sim world, I want to fly the aircraft and not wonder about the electronic compartments. Yeah. But all in all, I'm happy to see the developments, new aircraft types. When we talked prior to stream regarding the A320 and the amount of add-ons we have for that. So having now the A350, a completely new aircraft coming to the flight sim world, definitely very exciting. Yes.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I thought about with the electronics equipment bay that I think we see so often with folks is that I'm always surprised at the breadth of interest in the community, like how much somebody wants to be able to sit in the cabin and have the cabin look like, the carrier that they love. I'm sure somebody will be down there looking at all the lights and dials and whatever else are available in that compartment. It'll mean something to somebody, even if not most of us, I think, as a practical matter.
So, I wonder who's going to get a hold of the AM. Oh, go ahead, Black Box. Sorry.
I just want to chime in here because somebody was commenting on that in one of my streams, because I was sitting in the cabin in the PMG 777. It was the Qatar Airways, I think it was, with Emirates maybe, with the cabin layout. And I was like, wow, they did so much work with the cabin, texturing and modeling, even the big screens, for the passengers. And I thought, well, one day you'll be able to watch videos and films in the cabin in your flight sim.
Yeah.
And people are like, we don't need that. And I was like, well, there's surely a market for that. So I'll wait for the day when that comes around.
Right. Coming soon.
I mean, that's what I do already. I mean, that's when I do a long haul like that, I'm off the computer. I mean, I shouldn't tell that because I'm probably on VATSIM half the time, and I know that's a problem. But I go and I watch a movie. So I mean, if I can do that conveniently from the cabin, why is that an issue, right?
Yeah. Right. Just don't complain when it crashes and your FPS are terrible.
It tanks, right? Performance tanks. Yeah.
Exactly.
So enough of an aside. The digression. Right.
Yeah. Of course. Well, Black Box, I think a lot of people know that you have been a commercial pilot for nearly 30 years, but I think we're all fascinated, and one of the things we try to bring to light here on this podcast is what somebody's journey in aviation has been. And so we'd love to hear from you sort of the origins of the Black Box career in the real world, flying, for some of the biggest and most well-known planes that are out there.
Yeah, so it's been over 30 years. I started training in 1990 for a big airline here in Germany. I got infected with the aviation virus due to my father's career. He was a German Air Force fighter pilot, flying the Starfighter FO-104 and then later the Tornado. And I remember 1986, around that time, Top Gun, first Top Gun movie came out. And I said, I've got to become a fighter pilot as well. I was already doing glider flying back then, but initially I did want to join the German Air Force. and I passed all the tests. However, then my father took me out for a cold beer and said, "You know what, son? It's just not Top Gun anymore." Especially in Germany, there was a lot of kind of anti-military movements, the budgets being cut and so on. And they said, you just don't get many flight hours in the German Air Force anymore. And so he suggested that maybe I should be, pursuing a career in civil aviation. And so, I followed his advice, applied, and actually, was lucky enough to get chosen. And so what I did, I entered a so-called ab initio training, which took you right from the beginning through PPL, CPL, ATPL, all the theories, all the license requirements. And that took about 2.5 years. And then we had the first Gulf War, which put an end to my career, if you like, straight away after training. So I was out of work for 2.5 years. I studied economics, which was tremendously boring for me, but you had to do something. Sorry for all that. That's just studied economics, but that's just not my will. But so I just prayed and hoped that things will pick up again. And luckily, in 1995, the airlines were hiring again. In a big way, and so I got my contract, with that airline that I trained with, and so I flew with the 737 initially as a co-pilot for about 4 years. Then I went on to the 747 400, flew that as a first officer and a senior first officer, altogether for about 8 years. And then I went back as a captain onto the 737 Classics, and then they phased out the 737s, unfortunately, and then I was forced to fly the Airbus 320. Initially, it was a horror moment for me when I got the letter. I thought, "Oh my God, you've got to fly Airbus, right?" But I would say this: it's a fantastic aircraft. If you look at it from a workplace standpoint, very comfortable. The systems very much adapted to the pilot needs, and so I've actually thoroughly enjoyed working on that. And contrary to my initial belief, with all the computers running in the background in the A320, it's actually an amazingly reliable aircraft. So all in all, it was a fantastic time. And I think I flew that for 11 years. Yeah, 11 years altogether then. And then I had applied to fly the 747 again, but due to COVID and so on, and the halt regarding the transition trainings, and I had another application running for the 787 777, and that one got pulled first. And so last year, September, I started training and flying the 787, which I thoroughly enjoy. 787 is a beautiful, beautiful aircraft, contrary to the current anti-Boeing, vibes out there. I have to say, Boeing built a fantastic aircraft there, with the fly-by-wire system integrated, similar to the 777, and the system. Improvements make it a very nice aircraft to work on. Very quiet, which is strange. A quiet flight deck in a Boeing aircraft, but they managed with the 787. So, and then we already talked about prior to the stream. People always say, you can't be 54. You sound so young. So my voice, my heart is young, but I'm actually 54, turning 55 in October, and I've decided to hand in my. Well, resignation sounds a bit wrong. My pension handed in my cancellation of the contract, so that I go into the pension as a pilot, which is an option that you can do. It's something they implemented a long, long time ago to allow pilots to decide for themselves at what point they just do not feel fit enough, comfortable enough to continue flying, because age is a factor. You have people that age slowly, and you have people that age faster. And having just the option to hand and go into the pension is a good thing, I think. So nobody's forced to work longer than they feel fit. So next year, October, I'll end my career. And nevertheless, I will continue flying. I'm going to try to get my PPL training again, and maybe the IFR rating as well. And then I'll fly, just some GA aircraft around Europe.
Well, that might be fun to get out there and just do a little light flying, if you will. And so one of the things that you had sent us, because I want to sort of turn back around to sort of the early days in training and the 2.5 years working to your PPL, was I gather you got to fly a number of different planes during that time.
Yeah. So the Bonanza is known for, well, they call it the Rolls Royce, right, of GA aircraft, which is true. It's a very powerful aircraft. Had great, avionics. I mean, it didn't have GPS and that sort of stuff, so I'm not sure if I sent you a picture.
Sure.
It's a good old six-pack. A good old six-pack.
Yeah,
that's the.
Yep, that's the right one. Yep.
Yeah, A36, and then learning the basics. But even at the hot weather around Phoenix and the high density altitudes, the aircraft still performed very nicely, very reliably. And so that was I think we did about 90 hours on that, including solo flights and solo cross countries, which were really big fun. And then we moved on to the Baron, another very high-powered aircraft. That's the train. That's
right.
the Baron.
Sorry.
There.
I'm getting to the Baron. That's my next photo. Yeah. My apologies.
No
worries. So, another beautiful aircraft. That was so much fun to fly. Again, so powerful. And we practice engine failures with that, in life, in real time, and not in the sim. Actually, flying it for real. I told the story that one of the tricks the instructor had was to, drop his pen and then just reach down and shut off one of the fuel valves to the engines. And the engine ran for another 30 seconds with the remaining fuel in the lines, and then suddenly just stopped, right? And it came as a huge surprise every time. But that's how we learned to deal with engine failures.
Sure.
Yeah. So
pranksters. That's how you learned how to deal with it. Pranksters. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's
shared flight. You're gonna get your chance, I guess, at some point with some friends. And then the other picture you showed, that was a trainer. I don't know the exact name anymore of that, but that we did some acrobatics in that aircraft.
Yes.
Oh, really?
To spin training, which is a good thing because to actually feel G load in the real aircraft is something you have to experience. Because in the level D simulators, while you do get a little bit of motion, it cannot show you 2Gs or these accelerations you would have in a stall or an upset recovery situation. So actually having done that acrobatic mission, we had about 3 hours, I think, in them. That was good fun.
Oh, interesting. I imagine myself becoming slightly ill and nauseous during this process.
Yeah, whereas that sounds fun to me. So
that the thing is, it's fun, but I have to say I was good with loopings, but the barrel rolls, they always got me. That's when I was like 2 barrel rolls. Okay, I need a break.
Right, like I'm done.
That's a bit too much.
Well, I actually
did you have motion sickness? Speaking of which, were you prone to motion sickness? Because I've heard this. I've heard some people are prone to it, some aren't, and then they go on and they have great careers. But
yeah, it's a very good question because I get that asked in my live streams from time to time, where people wanting to pursue, young people wanting to pursue a career as an airline pilot, they do some glider flying and so on, or some GA flying, and then they get sick, and then they're like totally heartbroken. Is I'm getting sick every time. Will this put an end to my career? As well. Now, I would say statistically in our class, we had about 30 people in our class. I think about 5 had serious issues becoming sick in the aircraft, and 3 of them actually went back to Germany for a special training. So the Air Force Academy has a special training for these cases, and then they came back again and managed. So none of them dropped out ever from training because of feeling sick at the beginning. It's something your brain has to get used to and feel comfortable with. That's just it. And then once you've passed that, you probably never have that issue again.
Yeah, that I've heard that. I've also heard that even folks who really don't have a lot of motions or who are not really susceptible to motion sickness actually find the simulators the hardest because it's unnatural. And that long simulator sessions, most people feel a little off when they come out of them.
Yeah. One thing with the simulators, I think the newest models, they're actually pretty good. They have a little, very to no lag regarding the visual of the simulator with the motion. But I remember the older versions, when you did your first visual pattern or something to start to get warmed up. I had the same feeling. It was just something was off, and your brain is so good in noticing these little subtle differences. And so your brain tells you, hey, something's wrong, right? The motion does not fit completely in line with the visuals. And so I can understand that. I can relate that people that, go through longer sim missions where you actually have maybe visual approaches and so on, they can actually suffer from sickness as well. Yeah.
So I've heard Taxi was the big one. Yeah.
Taxi was terrible.
Yeah.
I was in one once, and the taxi was absolutely awful.
Yeah. Usually the good thing is these days, because taxiing takes so long, and you only have like 4 hours to get through the whole program, the missions actually start at the runway. So we don't have to taxi too long these days in these check rides.
How often do you find yourself in the simulator for the recurrent training?
Yeah, so legally it's twice a year for us here in Europe. So they changed the whole concept into something called evidence-based training, which is a good concept. So it is still a check flight. So it's spread over 2 days. So you have 2 days each 4 hours of flight simulation. And it starts off with something more like line-orientated, where you have a normal preparation, takeoff. Something happens. It can be something complicated where it requires good communication, management, and crew coordination, crew resource management. Or it can be quite time intensive or time critical, like cargo fire or something with an overweight landing. And then the instructor will see how the captain and the co-pilot work together. And he gets a very quick and good overview if there's any deficiencies that requires some extra training. So that's done in the first part. And then the second part is the good old engine failure at V1, RTO, low bit operation, etc. So the standard stuff. But that's a legal requirement. You have to do that and demonstrate that you're still capable of managing these faults. And then the second day is actually specifically designed to be able to train areas where you have some deficiencies. And then you have some other topics. For example, at the moment we have use of speed brakes, which is quite funny to have as a topic. But pilots seem to be hesitant using the speed brakes because they seem, the term the lever of shame. Have you ever heard that?
Yes. I have heard that. But it's silly.
So, yeah. So exactly, in principle, it's silly because the spoilers, the speed brakes are flight controls. They are part of the flight control system. Yeah. And so the thing is, though, if you use the speed brakes, then you've messed up your descent planning, right? So you have to kind of admit you've done something wrong, which is nonsense. But so the pilots will try some other means to get rid of the excess energy. But the easiest, quickest, and safest way to do so is use the speed brakes. So it's actually a topic at the moment. And then you will have some things like upset recovery, or maybe again some refresher regarding loss of airspeed indications, that sort of stuff. But that's how it's done these days. So twice a year you have to do that training.
I find that I want to go back to the speed brakes for a moment, if you don't.
Yeah, I was going to say
the thing that struck me about that was the notion that your Boeing 787, 777, since similar type rating, or your A320, or any of these big planes, as smart as they are, as good as they are, the notion that you don't have to be actively I guess intervening, but actively making sure that it's accomplishing what it's set out to do. It seems shocking to me because they're good, but no plane is that good all the time. And indeed, it strikes me that looking particularly at a 777 or something like that. I don't know if it's true in the 787, but certainly the triple. You're going to need some speed brakes somewhere.
Yeah, it's a good point. It strikes me as well. Having a look at how expensive these planes are, and then you have a computer system, a software system that would help you calculate your optimum descent path. However, the calculations, even if you don't get shortcuts, so even if you fly exactly the routing that you programmed into the FMS, you will still often leave that optimum path, be too high or be too low. So there's so many variables that go into it, right? With the weight of the aircraft that has to be correct. And believe it or not, there are cases where the aircraft is lighter or heavier than what you have in your load sheet. Right? It's just a lot of these values are actually estimated values, right?
Sure.
Because for example, the passengers are not weighed. Your luggage is weighed, but not the passengers.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you don't know how much hand luggage they take on. And there are some routings, some destinations here in Europe especially, that have traditionally a lot more hand luggage on board. There's a lot more weight in that. But yeah, these calculations, then the wind data, temperature data, the 787, for some reason, is programmed, in my opinion, a bit wrong regarding the VNAV path. So what we do, there's a option in the descent forecast page where you can enter the use of thermal anti-ice. So you can actually use that. And so the 787 only uses engine anti-ice from the bleed air of the engines. So the wing is actually electrically de-iced. So it doesn't have a huge impact. But still, when you switch on the engine anti-ice, it will extract some bleed air from the engines. So they have to spool up more and then produce more forward thrust. It may not sound like much, but be it 3, 4, 5%, that has an impact again on that path that you've programmed. And there's an option to put that value in, so you can put in like from level 300 onwards. I plan to use engine anti-ice, and even on a nice sunny days like we have at the moment, where you have plus 30 degrees, you would not use engine anti-ice really. You put that in because it will help you then to optimize the descent calculations and make it more realistic. So yeah, it's something that real world pilots also battle with. That's why the speed brakes is a perfectly good thing to use if you just get off the path.
Yeah,
just kind of. Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard a rumor that this comes from 747 communities. You spoke on the 747. Mm-hmm. I've talked to other pilots that the 747 is one of those aircraft that kind of it's got a lot of drag. Obviously, it's obviously a great aircraft, but it also has a lot of drag because there's a lot hanging off of it. And I've heard that's kind of where that notion comes from. Is 747 community guys. I was talking to Yas, and we talked about this before. He flew the 777, and I guess there would be individuals that would come from the 747, the 400, and go over to the 777, and then like they would be reticent to use the speed brake lever, and they would be over speed, they'd be high on approach, it'd be hard to to go down and slow down for them. And so it was kind of funny that I was wondering if this kind of emanates from the 747 community.
It could be. So I would definitely say that I didn't use the speed brakes that often on the 747 compared to now on the 787. Yeah. Right.
So you were talking a bit about some of the transitions and training. Tell us about a little bit, if you would, about your own journey there when you were going through the process of getting your PPL and your instrument rating and commercial and multi-engine, and then you found yourself moving to the 737. What kind of how was that adjustment for you? And because I'm assuming when you did that at that point, there was the requisite training, there was some simulator training. I'm assuming you actually got to go out and do some base training somewhere and do some circuits back at that time. What was that process like, and how did you find yourself adjusting to that new life?
So one thing people maybe underestimate is the amount of work you were expected to put in. But of course, when you get the chance, so when you're one of the very few chosen ones to do the flight training, you have an extremely high level of motivation. And that, of course, is needed because the whole 2 to 2.5 year journey is extremely stressful, extremely tiring. You're constantly being graded every flight is being graded, right? Every debriefing is, you're stripped naked. Everything you've done wrong will be presented to you. It's written down. So you have a constant, pressure resting on your soul to perform. So that's something I remember very vividly. The fact that in the US, when we trained there, just an example, we had early shifts and afternoon shifts. And so let's say you have early shift, you would get up about 5:30, 6 o'clock, look at the weather, do some final preparation, because when you had your briefing at about 6:30, your instructor expected you to have everything prepared, right? And do the briefing prior to the flight, regarding all the topics and so on. So 7:30 you would get to the plane, you would take off, do 2 hours yourself, and then you have 2 hours on the back where your flight buddy does his thing. And so after 4 hours you come back, debrief another hour and a half, then just have quick lunch, and then in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you had theory for another 3 to 4 hours in the afternoon. And so in the evening then you already have to prepare for the next day, right? So it was a constant, kind of shuffle with trying to make sure that you don't fall behind, because that's something that I found, seeing people falling behind, and then the workload, everything gets so much higher, the stress level gets so much higher. So it's always a good thing to try to force yourself to just be ahead of the curve. But that's stressful, definitely. That's stressful. So I love these photos that I have on Instagram these days, full of these wonderful, pictures and how much fun it is. It's fun, absolutely. And you're proud of, your achievements, but man, it's a lot of work. It really is. So for me, looking back, the whole 2 years until I went on to the training with the 737 went by so fast. And the level of adaptation regarding the speed of the aircraft, we went from the Bonanza over to the Baron, then to the Cheyenne turboprop aircraft, and then onto the 737. And the jump from the Cheyenne to the 737, even though the Cheyenne was fairly fast, but the jump onto the 737 was incredible. The aircraft, it's a jet. It is so fast. And again, trying to stay ahead of the curve is extremely stressful. And you have to realize that the whole training is extremely expensive. So the whole concept, all of the lessons are designed for a minimum flight time. So it's designed for those that can cope with all of that. And if there's anybody that needs more time, then they will get some extra training. But that feels negative in itself already, unfortunately. So that's where the whole pressure really comes from. Everything's so tightly fit with regards to all of these training topics and the training time that you have available. The 737 for me, however, was then the point where I really fell in love with the jet concept and the way the aircraft was designed to, help you with the everyday work as an airline pilot. Even though the work area as a first officer is different compared to the captain side, but purely the flying side of things, that was nice to see how everything in the end came together, and you felt comfortable very quickly with it. And so even though it was stressful, the whole concept worked. So it was a great journey, I can say that.
So I gather from that one of the sort of upsides ultimately, besides sort of getting where you wanted to go, was that the 737 was actually easier to do your job in than some of the more basic planes, it sounds like, because they have more tools for you to use.
Yeah, exactly. And the cool thing about the 737 was it's a conventional aircraft, right? It doesn't have fly-by-wire. And so the whole concept that you've learned with the Bonanza, the Baron, the Cheyenne, it worked also on the 737. So that's what I meant with, you felt comfortable with it really quickly. I know that some colleagues then went on to the A320, which has a different concept, and it's only because of the fly-by-wire system. But there, the aircraft actually supports you in manual flight, which then lowers your overall workload, and so that way, they felt comfortable quickly as well, but on a different level.
Right. It is. I imagine that. So correct me. Let me make sure I got that sequence right. So we're the 737, then you went to the 747, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, as we talked about prior to coming on the stream here, both Felix and I are huge 747 fans.
Me too.
And so, how long were you on the 747? And gosh, we all love a good 747 story. So, if anything you want to throw at us.
The 747, if I get asked what was the absolute, the most fun aircraft to fly, I would have to say the 747. It's just the size of it, first of all. So when you board the plane or you do the outside check, every time you just stand there in awe, thinking, my God, this, 400 tons of metal, right, actually does fly, and it flies reliably. So you look at the engines and know how much power they produce. And so one of the stories was that we had a routing that took us to Singapore, and then there was a night stop there, and then on the second day we flew a shuttle to Jakarta and back again. And that was always a lot of fun because we had very few passengers on that flight, usually less than 100, and a very light 747, right? So even if you completely derated it, right, max flex, it still had so much power left over. And I remember that I had a captain. He said, "Oh, you know what? Shall we try maxed power today?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, right." So,
yes,
it sounds like fun, right?
The answer is yes.
So yeah, sure. Who would say no to that, right? So there's us, both of us really excited about the upcoming full power takeoff, and so the captain was pilot flying, and he pushed the toggle buttons, and my first thought was, oh my God, right? The sheer force that you would press into your seat is something I've never ever witnessed before. It was incredible. And usually, when you take off in the 747, you go, okay, power take off, right? And then it takes a while, okay, thrust set, and then it just takes another 30 seconds, 80 knots, right? And it just 30 seconds, V1. It's a long, long time, right? But this was like, right, takeoff, thrust set, 80 knots, V1, rotate.
Right, exactly.
It was just, I just couldn't believe it. So we rotated, and we had a pitch limit of 20 degrees, right? And we were hanging at 20 degrees, and the aircraft accelerated. So we had to get the flaps in that climb because it was just accelerating towards the max flap speeds. And we were both sitting there afterwards. It was a bit silence afterwards, after we got the flaps. I was like, we thought, wow, that's incredible. So, and that's just due to the fact that the aircraft is supposed to be able to handle almost 400 tons in hot temperatures, high altitude, right? Yeah. So having that at sea level, 30 degrees centigrade, but still sea level, with only like 260 tons, right? That's just, an amazing amount of excess power that you have available.
Right. Takeoff roll 1,500 feet.
Yeah. No lie, we were passing 2,000 feet. We're still over the runway, so it was like, I don't know.
Oh man, wow!
I believe it. Yeah.
It was just So even the tower noticed. He said, "Wow, there's a steep climb." Yeah,
that's what you said. Can we skip that 250 below 10,000, please?
Yeah. So it's these moments that you do remember, and so one of the great things about 747 is it has so many backup systems, right? Be it the PAC system, the bleed system, electric system, engines, and so on. So, even crossing the Atlantic, you felt so comfortable, right? These days with a 787, well, I do look at all of the alternate en route airports. I check the engine instruments, regularly, because only having two motors is just a bit different to having four.
Yeah, the 747 is definitely one of those planes that I imagine not only from the perch from which you sit, it just feels dominant all around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's. I don't know if you ever had a chance to sit in the cockpit of a 747 in the real aircraft and look outside, just look down to the apron. It's wild. It's just something. Am I airborne already? It's just so high.
Yeah.
Something you've never seen before. It's a really interesting perspective.
I've not been in the cockpit. I've been in the upper deck and the lower. I've been in a number of 747s over the years, and in different seats. And compared to any other sort of aircraft that I've been in just as a passenger, you can feel maybe the A380 is a little bit that way too. But it's colossal in a good way. Colossal in a good way. Yeah, no, I love the 747. In fact, behind me it's a 2-window panel from a scrap British Airways 747.
Oh, nice.
That was actually a gift. My wife got that for me. So
nice, lovely.
Yeah,
and I see you have a lot of hardware in the background there as well.
Oh yeah, I have a little bit of a hardware problem, and in fact,
it's a humble brag. It's his humble brag.
It's my humble brag. I won't deny, but it's actually back on the table. There is Flight Deck Solutions 747, an old one of theirs from them, the MCP and the EFIS, and a little radio control panel, and one of the CDUs.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a fun little thing to have. Challenging to get integrated with Microsoft Flight Simulator, but luckily there's a developer out there who's been working hard on it, and I've been occasionally basically offering him my computer to let him fiddle with it remotely, which is sort of interesting. Yeah. But so then you went from the 747, and then you went to the A320, right?
I went back to the 737 for about 5 years as a captain, which I treasure very much. It's always been a dream to be a captain on a 737. And of course, it would have been really fantastic to be a captain on a 747 in the end. But now having a chance to try out something completely new, and with the 787, I'm very happy with that. So not sad at all.
No. And on your second stint with the 737, was it still classic, or were you on the NG at that point?
Yeah, still classics. So 300, 400, 500.
Yeah. So those just to go on the 7. Which one was your favorite of the classics? Was it the 500 because it's the smallest? Was it the 400? Which one?
Interesting question. In fact, it's similar to the A320 series. So on the 737, my favorite was the 737-400 because you felt it had more mass. So. It for me, it always felt easier to handle, easier to predict, regarding the touchdown. Same with the A320 series. So the 321 was the aircraft that I personally felt most comfortable landing because I could just feel the aircraft a lot better. It just behaved more reliable, more consistent. And the worst thing was the A319. Which for the life of me, I couldn't land properly until the end. So it was always like hit and miss. One day I will land it smoothly, and I thought, now I've got it. Now I understand how. And the next landing, bam! It's just, I don't know. It's just not so.
Just sprang it on.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to tell people they will say, hey, but it's the same. It's fly-by-wire, right? It's only 3 meters smaller, and I don't know what it is, but there's a difference, definitely.
Well, I mean, I think that's the you said it best when we had our discussion about the aircraft being, about descent rates, right? VNAV being programmed. Just because the fly-by-wire is the same doesn't negate the laws of physics. The aircraft is smaller and it's going to behave differently no matter what computer you throw at it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. It's funny that you talk about the A321 being your favorite. It's my favorite because it's a dog above flight level 250, at least in the sim it is. I don't know if in real life it climbs like that, but I like it because it's just generally it's the worst performing. And I think from a sim aspect, you kind of want that challenge, right? You don't want it always click a button easy, it takes off within half runway length, on like a 57 degree flex or something. And
yeah. Yeah, it's just the whole concept and the feel of the aircraft. It's always been nice on the A320, and my absolute favorite was actually a 321 Neo, because that seated over 200 passengers, had up to, I think it was almost 90 tons of gross weight. So that was a big aircraft. While the 319 is sporty, right? No doubt. So it was also fun. But yeah, for me, it's always been the bigger and the more heavier aircraft that I felt more comfortable with.
It's interesting.
So it's that feeling of, go ahead.
So it's interesting you mention that, because some folks that we know that fly the 737NG, they say they like the 900. Probably similar.
A good friend of mine likes the 900 ER. Well, I think he likes the ER. I don't think he likes the base 900.
Yeah, the ER, but there are no humans flying a base 900. You get my point.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, they and I've actually taught. I don't know, Black Box, if you ever watched the streamer Sheed. I know he was a Phoenix beta tester. I don't know if it's the same time.
I remember the name. But, I remember the name, but I don't think I've ever seen a stream or something. No.
So he was a Boston controller, but my point is, I asked him one time about, hey, which one do you like? And it was on a stream, and he said the same thing. He's like, I like the 321. He said in cruise, it's the most stable. You're not getting thrown around as much. And I think it was kind of the same thing, right? There's that comfortability, that stability while you're airborne, or you're in the transitional phase of flying that I think pilots do enjoy versus, like the 319. Yeah, cool, it's sporty, but like, hey, it's just smaller. It's a little bit, exactly.
Yeah.
So
also one
it's.
thing.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, one last thing on that topic. It's one thing people don't realize maybe that often, or if they're passengers. Airline pilots actually care a lot about passenger comfort. So, of course, we have safety being the highest priority, sure. But then we have things like economic considerations, so fuel savings, but also passenger comfort. That's always very important. So aircraft that have kind of a heavier feel to it and, go through turbulence a little bit softer compared to the lighter aircraft. So that's maybe another point where people will prefer the 321, it being heavier and just smoother in that regard.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a sort of non sequitur to that, with the A321 and with the longer range, the LR and the XLR coming, we see a lot more transatlantic, narrow body. I have flown quite a few of them myself, and I'm sort of curious what your reaction to that is, since, as I gather, most of your or all of your transatlantic or transpacific transportation, flying has all been on wide bodies. How do kind of what's your reaction to how that's coming along, and what do you think about that for the business at large?
So the developments, I see the economic pressure behind it. Getting these 321 XLRs and so on, and we're already seeing quite a few. Not the XLRs, but we're seeing 321s, Neos from. What's it called? JetBlue over the Atlantic. I've seen them in London. So I would say, it has its place. With regards to the fuel savings, etc. If you look at passenger comfort, I know that business class obviously has the comfort, but I've heard some pretty horror stories about the economy class on these extremely long flights with that small cabin. You may argue, well, in the end, you have the same, space available in the economy class. It doesn't matter if it's a long range aircraft or 321, long range. But I don't know. It has to do with the cabin itself, right? So the feeling you have sitting down and looking around the aircraft. So if you have a fuselage that's much wider, you feel, I would say, less claustrophobic and more comfortable. So I would say, from a passenger point of view, I think not optimal to see these aircraft on long-range routes. But economically, sure, it makes sense.
A little corollary to that I wonder about, from my perspective, being a passenger, since I'm not going to be up in the cockpit, but I wonder for you guys, it's the same, is one of the things I've really appreciated on the time that I was on a Dreamliner, but also on the 380 is the slightly lower altitude, relative cabin pressure altitude, and how refreshed you are. Indeed, one of the things I always kind of would love to have tried once was Concorde because of how low that is. Well, plus it's so fast and short. But I wondered, as a pilot, do you notice that too in terms of your fatigue levels?
Yeah, so the 787 is an aircraft that has two very nice features. One of them is the lower cabin altitude, as you've mentioned. So usually, if even at 40,000 feet, I've checked the cabin altitude to be around 6,000 feet only. So not 7,000 or 8,000 feet. Wow. So that's a lot lower percentage-wise. And yes, people are noticing that. So you get less, less fatigued. On top of that, we have a humidifier system on the 787. So the humidity levels are a little bit higher. You will not necessarily notice it straight away, but I think after 8-hour, 10-hour flight, it does help you, maintaining your water levels in the bloodstream. So that's something that passengers do notice, definitely, and me as a pilot notice that as well. Yeah.
I sort of segued off into La La Land there for just a moment, but I'm sorry, Felix, you were about to ask.
Oh, I was gonna say, I can tell you. So, my home airport's Orlando. My go-to airline is Delta, and so you obviously know that all roads lead to Atlanta with them. My point being that there's always an opportunity for me to do short haul domestic or wide body short haul domestic, right? And so you don't think it makes a difference, but having flown 757 a million times, I've flown the 757 more than any other aircraft. And having done the one time I got to fly at 767, it was actually noticeable, even for short haul. So I can imagine if you're going to extend that over, the Atlanta to Orlando is an hour and a half flight, right? I can imagine if you're going to extend that over 6, 7, 8, hours. What are they quoting? Book endurance on the XLR is going to be 10 hours. I could only imagine that at that point it's going to be one of those things that it really is going to be a factor. And I think, like you said, fatigue. So does Airbus come out with a humidifying system on the A321 LR XLR to kind of address this? Do they try to, because the thing is and as we know, if you're going to, because in order to have a lower cabin altitude, you're increasing the pressure, which is increasing the pressure on the pressure vessel, the bulkhead. And, that could lead to fatiguing problems later on in the aircraft's life, no matter what aircraft it is, because you're having the pressure differential is going to be greater. Right. Yep. And so, I'm sure, listen, I'm saying this, I'm not an engineer. I'm sure that Airbus and Boeing both have fantastic smarter people than I am that are working on this, that have already thought about this 10 years ago. But I was just kind of thinking about that. It's funny you make that point about the humidifier. When I remember when I got the quality wings, it was one of the first buttons I noticed. I was like, humidifier, what is this?
Yeah. I like the concept as well that in the 787 they don't have a typical bleed system for the packs, so they have their own compressors that deliver that pressured air for the air conditioning system. Unfortunately, on the 777X they went the old way again, so that will have normal bleed extraction from the engines for the environmental system. So that's a shame.
Systems commonality.
But yeah, otherwise we'll have to see how the XLRs will be commented on by the passengers.
So when you were on the A320 fleet, I assume you were obviously in a shorter haul scenario, and that's a different kind of lifestyle than a long haul scenario. has moving. You've moved back and forth from long haul. You've been on the 747. You've been on the A320, the 737, now on the 787. How big an adjustment is it? I think a lot of people, certainly simmers, we hop on a plane, whatever. We go off into the kitchen, we grab a sandwich, whatever we're doing, and the plane's flying along. But for actual lifestyle, it's a pretty big difference to go from sort of one fleet, if you will, to another.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah, long range and short range, two completely different setups. So the short range is obviously a lot more stressful because you're doing 3, 4, 5 sectors a day. You're going to have to face weather on departure, arrival a lot more often than you have maybe slots because ATC staffing, weather situations, whatever. Passenger issues, loading issues, you name it. So that's part of the short range that does cause a lot of stressful moments. On the other hand, short haul means you get to fly a lot more, right? You get 2-3 landings a day, right? So long range now, it's the opposite, all right? You just do one preparation per flight per day, and then close the doors. You get on your way and you fly, in one direction for 8 hours, 10 hours, 13 hours, however long the flight takes. You've got stuff to do. It's not completely boring, as people make it out to be. Time does go by quickly flying long range, but you get off. And then you have 24-hour, 48-hour layover somewhere, and then you do the return flight. So the bigger issue is long range is really the amount of landings that you get. So at the moment, I get 2, maximum 3 landings a month right now. So that's a lot less to what I had previously. Yeah, and another thing is the jet lag. So jet lag, people always refer to jet lag in the sense of the time zones. Yeah, I mean, definition, goes on that. But for me, the jet lag is the fact that I usually lose 2 nights of sleep in a row. So when I fly, let's give an example, fly from Germany to the US somewhere, for 10 hours, and then we hop off. It's 10 o'clock in the evening in Germany, and it's only like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the US. So what we do, we stay awake, right? We go out, have something to eat and so on, and then I get to bed around 8, 9 o'clock US time. But that's like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning in Germany. Right. So literally, that's the first night that I lose. Yeah. And then you try to get some sleep, catch, but the sleep just doesn't have the same quality as if you go to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening, right? So then let's say you only have like 24 hours at your destination. Then you fly back, and the flight back right over the Atlantic is always nighttime, always. So you lose the second night in a row. And so when I get home, I feel absolutely derailed. It's such a weird feeling. So it's not so much that I had to get used to a different time zone, because it's not, because I'm back home within 3 days. But it's just the fact that I've lost 2 nights of sleep, really. And now at my age, I really feel that. It takes me like 2 days, 3 days to recover again from that, and get back into a normal sleeping rhythm. So that's really the challenge of long-range flying.
I won't lie. I do wish that there were some morning flights out of here from the United States to Europe. I would be a very happy camper, but alas, no days. Not a thing.
So
I
was going to say, so work-life balance. Like so comparison short haul, long haul, right? Work-life balance. Cause I think that's another thing, about like simmers, maybe they want to get into it and kind of explaining those seem like in talking to people, that seems like another thing where those are two completely different animals.
Yeah. I talk, or I report from my own experiences, and I do that in a fairly honest way. So you have these Instagram pilots, I call them, posting always lovely stuff, right? And I've sent you some pictures, and you've commented on how beautiful the pictures are. And yes, there are incredibly beautiful moments in aviation. It's a really wonderful job. However, there are downsides, and the downsides are not to be neglected. One of them is the work-life balance, as you say. Short range, it may be a bit different depending on how your airline is set up. I mean, if you have an airline that has a home base somewhere, so you go off in the morning, on the afternoon, you fly 4 sectors, and you come back home again in the evening, on the afternoon, then you have a fairly kind of standard, normal day-to-day work time lifestyle. However, if you have an airline that has rotations that take you away from home for 4 or 5 days, and you sleep over at hotels around different cities, then that's completely different. And then you're away 5 days. You come home maybe for 2 or 3 days, and then you're back off again 5 days. So one thing that's really challenging is keeping social contacts alive. And you could forget about sports clubs, right? Football clubs, because you're never going to be able to be there every Tuesday or every Saturday for the game, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to find a sport like golf where you can play on your own, maybe,
By yourself.
saying it drastically, right? But you get the drift. It's just a lot more difficult to balance these things, social life and work life. I'm lucky. I have a wife that has, right from the start, accepted this weird lifestyle, and she's been with me all this time. And I know she's happy to see me retire next year. So then getting. I hope she doesn't regret that I'm going to be home all the time, but we'll have to see. COVID did show that actually we do cope with each other quite well, even though from home full time. But yeah, long range is a bit different because usually you have a bit more break in between these rotations. So you like 3-4 days at home before you go off again. But that depends, mainly on the airline and its concepts. But yeah, it's a challenge. Work-life balance is. I know that from these days, the fact that many airlines do not get enough applicants for airline pilots positions. One of the big topics is work-life balance. So that's on the mindset of the young people these days, and so airlines have to scramble and trying to see how they can offer that, maybe part-time contracts and so on. But there's definitely a shift in mentality in that regard.
I think you see that across many businesses that are particularly 24/7, 365 businesses, because it's, I'm sure it's not just pilots. I'm sure there's lots of other positions that they find challenging to fill because of that, where
absolutely,
people, they don't want to work under certain conditions, or the pay isn't there, or some combination thereof. Yeah, it's I don't doubt that for a second. And then, so one of the things that has gone on at the same time that you've been doing all this flying is you've also been simming.
Yeah.
And so how long have you been simming? And I gather flying came first, simming second, but how did that all come about?
Yeah, weirdly enough, the first contact I had with a flight simulator was in 1988. I remember that I had my first computer. It was a Spectrum, it's called. It's just literally a keyboard, and you attached a cassette recorder to it. So the software was on a cassette that played some weird sounds, and that was transferred into the computer. And so if you're lucky, you manage, after 3 tries, you managed to load the software, and then you were able to play a game. And I remember that was an F-15 simulator. Now it sounds funkier than it is. It was just literally just what it's called these days, Roboblocks or something, or it was like a couple of squares on the TV, right. But you could make out some airspeed indicator and some altitude indicator. So it was a very basic simulator. That's the very first time I had contact with that. I remember that very vividly. Later then, during training, I had some contact with Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I don't know exactly which version that was. Again, a very basic version, but I actually, believe it or not, I practiced holding patterns with that. Because that time we had HSI holding patterns, and man, I practiced that, just to become perfect in that. VOR flying, radial DME distance check, that sort of stuff. I practiced with that. Then there was a pause. I remember that there was a pause when I was flying the 737. I came back, and I must have been FSX. I was just training as a captain on the 737, where I bought FSX, and there was an add-on called Wilco 737.
Yes.
And that had a very good FMS system. It was literally a one-to-one copy of the real thing. So I used that and the autopilot system to practice again. And I got myself a couple of airport sceneries like Paris, Charles de Gaulle, Amsterdam, London Heathrow, so that I could taxi around and kind of get a visual picture already in my head, because these airports are horrendous to taxi around on. So actually, I did use these flight sims to prepare for my real world flying. Flight sim. And then there's another pause until 2015 when I heard FS Labs developing A320. And I was actually flying the A320, of course, back then. And the way they were advertising it got my attention, because I thought, nah, that can't be that good, right?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So it was released in 2016, and I tried it, and I was fascinated. I was so fascinated about how well they modeled the autopilot system, the FMS, or the MCDU, the fly-by-wire system. It was just really, really fascinating. That's the first time, really, that I felt like, wow, you can actually use that simulator to practice for your real-world flight sim missions, for your check flights. So I did a video, I think, on YouTube or something, and then somebody, Brennald, one of my moderators, he came on and said, "Hey, why don't you live stream on Twitch?" And I'm like, "Hey, live stream? Yeah, I've seen it. My daughter talked about it, but hang on, what?" So I read into it, and I thought, "Hey, why not?" So I threw in a live stream with my very basic, cheap PC. Got about 27 FPS or something, and then I did some flying around, and I had I think somebody posted that on Reddit, and I had 50, 60 views on the first stream. And people saying, "Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, thanks for showcasing." And, "Oh, now I understand the systems," and so on, blah, blah, blah. Please stream again. So I did, and I found it so fascinating to use that simulator to its full extent, and then have people, in real time ask questions and "Hey, can you for?" And the whole interaction and the cool atmosphere and feeling the flight sim community vibes that way was really fascinating. I thought, okay, if people are that interested and show that much appreciation for that, well, yeah, I think it's worth my time in doing that. And then FS Labs, the developer, contacted me and asked me if I want to be a technical advisor for them, because they had plans to bring out 319, 321, and so on. And I thought, yeah, why not? Right, I can help maybe in a few things. And that was a tremendous eye-opener to see, get a bit of background information on how much work goes into these developments, into these flight sims, and how dedicated these developers are, these programmers are, and especially with FS Labs guys, they would bring things on to a new level, and so they were raising the bar, where it puts pressure on companies like Aerosoft and you name it, P&G, to really keep up. And so the competition in that regard is a very good thing.
Yep.
So that has just gone on, and I've helped out with the Phoenix a little bit. And you mentioned prior to the stream Todorico with the Hot Start Challenger 650, which in my opinion is the absolute best add-on when it comes to realism, when it comes to the amount of things you can display in a background system simulation and so on. So if you really want to get into all of the little details, I mean, he has definitely raised that bar again. And up to now, while people are getting close to it, none have come right up to that bar yet. So it's an interesting journey, and really fascinated to be in it and follow that along for the next years.
Well, one of the things I appreciate is you got right to what your favorite add-on is, so that's good.
I was going to ask that. That was easy.
Or maybe what you think is the most high fidelity. Maybe that's a better way to describe it, because one of the things about the Challenger is that learning curve is 100% real with the plane being total as we know from first principles, really ground up for virtually everything except a few flight model bits and pieces that still rely on Laminar and X-Plane. And of course, he's developed so many systems that go around it. But yeah, it's getting into that plane and being successful with it really depends on you being as serious about it in many respects as anybody who's flying the plane in real life, which is an achievement in itself, I think. So
yeah, especially he programmed that on his own, right? Absolute genius.
Yeah.
And hearing that he's trying to get the A220 programmed is fantastic. That's something to look forward to. Yeah. So for me, the most fidelity add-on, the highest fidelity add-on is FS Labs, absolutely. And we've seen some great add-ons come out with the Phoenix. I think the P&Gs are good. However, they did disappoint a little bit with the 777 that they didn't really add too much new stuff. They had the chance, but they did some things with the radius to fix, for example, CPDLC integration. But they could have done more. They could have maybe integrated a newer FMS software standard,
right?
Some other bits and pieces, but then we get to that discussion, who is it for, right? As you just mentioned, if you get such a high fidelity aircraft add-on, you're literally obliged to use it to its full extent. And we know that with Microsoft Flight Sim coming out 4 years ago, it brought in millions of new flight simmers into that arena, which is fantastic. But we have to realize that it's new flight simmers. They are absolutely overwhelmed with these high fidelity add-ons. So it's difficult to please everyone in that regard. And in the end, these add-on makers have to make money, right? If they don't succeed in making it a profitable business, then they will disappear again, which would be bad for us flight simmers. All right, we want them to be successful and continue to bring out new, better aircraft for us in the future. But in the end, it's all, as I say on when I get these questions asked on my live streams, I would say, well, use it to your best abilities, and it's your money. You've spent your money on the add-on, so hopefully you've looked into it prior. You watch some streams or watch some tutorial videos, some review videos on it. Ask a friend maybe who owns it about their opinion, and then you spent your hard-earned money on it. And the important thing then is that you enjoy it. And it doesn't matter to what level, right? As long as you enjoy it, that's the important thing. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't represent 100% true to life avionics and so on. You need to enjoy it. That's the thing. It needs to remain fascinating for you. And then if you kind of get hooked, if you kind of get the virus, you will appreciate then the amount of tutorials available, communities available that will then help you to progress and and then enjoy the more fidelity side of it. But yeah, we all started out small. We all started at the beginning. But I'm definitely very happy and very humbled by the fact that these add-on makers are spending so much time and effort in trying to make these add-ons as realistic as possible.
Well, Felix and I discussed the other day sort of a mid-2024 review and looking at what a great year it's already been, and there's a lot of interesting stuff coming. We talked about the A350 with you a little earlier, and you mentioned a 777. You actually did a video the other day on one of my favorite little features in the 777. It's also in the 747, and which is the off-path descent. One of those great features that's in there for when ATC is giving you that shortcut and you're trying to figure out what you can do and can't do. And one of the things that I notice in that is that in doing a video like that is that the folks who are making the add-ons, as much work as they're putting into it to make these things go, I think one thing that is probably lacking often is that they're not giving the user sometimes the tools they need to learn how to do the stuff that they want to do. So there might be a tutorial flight, which is good. Some people do it, some people don't. But I think that as much as time as you're spending developing, you have to help the users along too. And luckily, there are people like you who are really doing a tremendous service for this community. When you get on with an add-on like the PMDG, or you're flying the FS Labs, your willingness to try almost any plane, I think, is a huge boon, because we see the homework that you do before you get on a stream. And of course, some of the planes you've flown and know them well, but I mean, it's invaluable. And I'm sure you have a feel for that, but I just want to tell you straight out that it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I one of the reasons I'm still, after 7 or 8 years now, 8 years almost streaming, one of the reasons that I still love doing it is because of the feedback that I get from people just like you now. I get a lot of very positive comments, and people being thankful for showcasing these features and to help those learn about these things that are implemented in these great add-ons. If it weren't for the fascination and the outlook, even going forward, I wouldn't be here. So it works both ways. I get back so much through the communities as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm curious as to your reaction to this, because one of the things that I notice trying to help some other people with stuff. So Felix and I are both active in a number of Discords where part of what we do is try to help folks. There's nothing like getting asked the questions to really help you understand the answers you think you know. And I can imagine for you, as someone who's spent a lot of time in real planes, you're like, I know how this works, but wait a minute now, like, what's the exact answer? And I notice that you will come back and take the time to not only provide detailed answers, but sometimes I've seen you come back and say, hey, I worked up this whole, here's a document I put together to talk about it. And I guess the questions must inspire you to do the homework a bit too.
Yes, so I've actually profited as well, no doubt, from people asking these questions, because otherwise I would not have researched the topic, and that way I've actually definitely increased my own knowledge level in many areas. And we talked prior to this stream. I have wonderful people here in my community as well, helping out in the background. They've consumed all kinds of ECOMs, the operating manuals from different aircraft. They know in parts more than I do. I find it very fascinating. So for non-professionals to have that kind of motivation to read through very dry documents in parts, right? Yeah. But to acquire the knowledge that they have, incredible, really amazing. So hats off to them. But they help me out tremendously as well. So quite often when I get asked a question, you'll find someone like Bruno or MCK or there's some other people there in the background that will already answer the question for me. So hats off to them. A big thank you at this moment to them.
Because one of the things we were going to say was that you don't, with the number of subscribers and activities that you're involved with, plus your flying time, you do have some help, and there's sort of a team black box 7-Eleven out there, and we were sort of curious, sort of looking behind the veil, how many folks are helping you out, and how did they sort of come to be on your team?
Yeah, so I have about 8 to 10 moderators in the background, and they all chime in whenever they can. Because I know, everyone has their own life. They have to, go and work, pay the bills and so on. But these people have been with me pretty much right from the start, and they are wonderful people. I've met every one of them, apart from one I have not met yet in real life, but everybody else I've met in real life as well. So face to face, getting to know them. They are helping out so much. And I would definitely say without their help, this would not be possible. absolutely, because they do so much for me.
Yeah.
And one of the big things right now, Senshai, one of my moderators who's already programming lots of stuff in the background for the website that we have, and also the little widget in the Parallel 42 Flow app. Or actually, there's also now a toolbar little app where you can have a look at my airport infos, get the weather infos, and so on, the procedures, the flows for different aircraft types. So he's done an amazing amount of work for the community again, because I know it does help a lot of people, on their everyday adventures in the flight simming arena.
So one of the questions that comes up and we see all the time is what we call simisms. And we sort of describe these as things that users perhaps spend a lot of time focusing on that maybe isn't really as important as they think it is. Classic example of that is, what was your landing rate? But nobody wants to answer if they were actually landed at the airport itself or if they just landed somewhere at 85 feet per minute. And I imagine, given your real world experience and I'm sure the questions you get all the time on stream, what are some simisms that you would like to sort of perhaps disabuse the community of, if you could?
Yeah. So I would wish for people to spend some time to learn and read approach charts, understand, ILS approaches or maybe RNF approaches, understand which minimas to use, because that's an everyday thing for us pilots. Every day we have to use these, right? And we really look at them and we brief it, and it's so important, right? That's an everyday thing for us, and I think if you're really into flight simming, that's definitely an area that people need to spend time on and need to learn and understand. It's not that complicated. Then another thing is, just like you mentioned, the landing rates. So how do we pilots in real life rate a good landing? Well, yes. So if you manage to touch down softly, it'll please the crowds for sure. But there are a lot of challenges every day, crosswinds, short runways, heavy aircraft, up and down drafts, you name it, bad visibility and so on, contamination on the runway. So we pilots, when we think about a landing, we don't think about a soft touchdown, right? So we have a look at how much landing distance do we need, and where is the latest point where I have to touch down on the runway for that required landing distance that we have. A lot of flight sims these days offer you a landing distance calculator. So again, if it's there, learn how to use it, because it's a big part. It's a legal part. It's a legal requirement for us pilots. Every landing, we have to work out the required landing distance. So that's the very realistic way of doing things. So when we approach an airport at a runway, we have made a game plan, meaning we will tell the other pilots, hey, this is what I plan to do. I want to touch down latest there. And, we'll use that auto brake setting. We'll vacate at that point. So you make a plan. And the good landing then is if you touch down exactly where you wanted to. And if you manage that in a soft manner, even better. But that's secondary, right? First thing, touch down exactly as you want it. Give an example, you have strong crosswinds. The worst thing to do is to float the aircraft. Because I can guarantee you, if you float and float and float, the wind will start pushing you sideways. And that has two bad implications. One, it puts a lot of stress on the landing gear. Well, your flight sim won't really care too much. Well, who knows? Maybe at some time we'll have add-ons that will care. And then, it's going to blow you off the runway, right? So you don't want to drift, right? So strong crosswind means you need to touch down quickly, right? But you don't want to slam it, right? So it has to be a mixture. Again, a good landing is quick brake, touch down, have the aircraft decrabbed in time, and don't float too long, right? So there's a lot of different, goals that you aim for, but soft touchdown isn't the main priority. That comes secondary. I'll give an example. Just landing a couple of days ago in the US, we had a runway assigned to us that gave us about 150 meter margin to the legal required landing distance. So that's only 500 feet of flare distance that you have past the 1,000-foot markers. And so again, you need to have a strategy, right? And then to be able to perform the landing in a manner to touchdown at that point, it's a challenge. And that landing was a bit more positive than my co-pilot wanted it to be, but hey, he nailed the spot. So I said, hey, don't worry about, yeah, sure, it was a bit harder, but you did exactly what you're required to do. So, that was the main goal. And he did a great achievement on that. But yeah, that's one of the things, right? Soft landings. And one thing on my streams, people always make fun of me because I rarely land with less than 150 feet per minute descent rate. So I will usually have anywhere between 150 to 400 feet per minute because I focus on something else, right? I could flare the aircraft every time for miles and miles and touch down softly. That's not a skill, right? Anybody can learn that.
I especially appreciate the notion of what you're trying to accomplish on a given landing being, your first consideration, and it's something that would like to see emphasized a little bit more. Maybe even just in what the add-on producers provide as well. And I think people forget there are no landing rate monitors in the plane. I'm not going to tell you what you landed at. So
yeah, weird enough on the 787, we actually have a page in the maintenance menu where you can actually look at your feet per minute and the G load on touchdown. So
yep,
it's in the maintenance page though.
No, yeah, there's some proprietary stuff. I've seen it. There's some depending on what company you work for. They get pretty granular on the landings, and and I would imagine that it's not so much like, hey, pat you on the back. It's kind of like, and I think you've intimated this, Black Box, the idea that you're constantly learning. This isn't just a sim thing. This is like your real life. Like, you're trying to hone your skill. You're trying to make it so that practice makes better practice, right? And I think other pilots who, have always talked about, if you're, I know Sully famously said, like, you in an emergency, you're only going to go down to basically your highest level of training, right? Like, that's what your mind is going to revert to. And so, and I know that this, where things change, right? So you could have gotten assigned that runway. What if the airport configuration changes? And you're about to turn base, right? And so now all of a sudden, plan change. Now, probably that's a hyperbole. They're probably not you're turning base. They're probably not going to stick you on a new runway. But if you're getting within range of the airport, they might do that. And, the plan changes, and maybe now we have a little bit of a tailwind. And I think that's kind of, the one of the things that you were saying is, like, it's not necessarily like, maybe it's not necessarily, knowing MDA and, the difference between decision height, decision altitude, these sort of things. It's more about planning, right? Because that's what pilots do, is they plan. Everything is a plan. So. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. You often don't have the time to, to go in holding and replan and so on. So, yeah, Plan B is always got, especially in the US, you can be assigned, 2 or 3 different runways. You get told very late in the approach. So yeah, there are means of programming something in the Route 2 page or secondary flight plan, etc. But yeah, and people, if they have that kind of motivation to learn these things, especially flying on the networks like VATSIM or Pilot Edge, they will feel that the flight then becomes very realistic, and that's another topic, right? I'm sure you guys are also using these ATC networks.
Yes.
Because especially the events, all right, with lots of traffic, you get that tingling sensation, don't you? Right? It's just one of those next levels to achieve. And then, once you've coped with the workload and with the communication and landed the aircraft safely, you feel you've done something, you've achieved something. So that's a great part of these flight simming as well.
Well, all of us here, and I know you have because I've seen your streams. We've all done the cross the ponds and these sorts of things, and it's always a charged atmosphere for those. Or if you get on a pilot edge, which I know Black Box, you're on there sometimes, and I'm fortunate enough to fly on there occasionally myself, and they're expecting a lot from you. On a system like that, and actually, I've only done one IFR flight ever on Pilot Edge. All my other flying has been GA, and in some ways, GA is even harder.
Yep, I agree. I fully agree. Yeah,
it's a different kind of communication. The expectations are different, and you might get some different instructions. It's not as structured in a lot of those cases. So
that's true. Yeah.
And I know you do some GA flying on your stream. I went and did one of the VATSIM P1 programs. It's a different way to fly. It helps with the airmanship because I will say that one of the things that I always feel good about if I'm in an airline or on an MSFS or whatever is, well, worst case scenario, I know I can land the plane. No matter what happens. If I don't need, if I turn everything off, so to speak, and just click off the autopilot and go fly, it's going to work out because of that time working with those systems. And just practicing with some planes that don't have anything in them, and because that's where everyone starts who's really flying.
I think that's also. I know that a lot of people are fascinated by the good old fly JSIM 737 or 727, where you don't have a GPS system, you don't have an FMS necessarily, right? And then you fly VOR to VOR, and people are wondering, how do you do that? Well, not too long ago, that was how aircraft were navigating, right?
Right.
There was no map display and there was no GPS, and aircraft still managed to fly safely in all kinds of weather conditions from A to B. So having the flight sims to actually be able to reproduce that is great as well for those that want to embark on that journey.
And really, flight sim's a great place to practice IFR work because that's one of the things you can replicate. It's hard, as you say, it's hard to replicate feel in a plane or something like that. But IFR procedures, you can replicate those pretty well.
Yep, exactly.
So one last, one of the things that we know that you are sort of a fan of, because I am too, is hardware for your sim. Is one of the things I think a lot of simmers wonder about is what's my bare minimum? What should I have to really sort of replicate some reasonable level of flight simulation? What do I need to own? From your
that's a very good question. That's a good question. Yeah, if you're really serious about trying to get a certain level of immersion into flight simming, rudder pedals is definitely so. With the brake pedal function, that's something you would need, in my opinion, because coordinated flight, especially in the conventional aircraft, you need rudder pedals. Otherwise, a twisted joystick or twist function in a joystick just doesn't do that. So rudder pedals. Then I would definitely go with a good joystick or yoke. So depending on what your favorite aircraft is, I don't see it being shameful to use the 737 with a A320 flight stick. I think that's perfectly fine, or vice versa, right? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So immersion comes from different things. But if you have a good quality yoke or joystick, then I think that really helps you, getting muscle memory, becoming predictable on your landings and so on. Getting feel comfortable, and then I would definitely go with some sort of throttle set. So something that has throttle, speed brake, maybe even landing gear lever or something. That would also help, I think, for immersion, for workload management in that regard.
So, if I recall correctly, you've got a Bravo, but I may not be remembering.
I only got it. I got a Brunner force feedback now. So I had the Thrustmaster yoke. And I had the Thrustmaster Warthog base with the FS Projects A320 stick on top of that. But finally, it's because I saw V1 simulations use the Brunner yoke, and I was getting so envious. I thought, man,
I saw he has one of those. That looked pretty snazzy.
Yeah. And then I looked at the price and said, no, I'm not going to pay you 1,500 euros. No, I can't explain that to my wife. No, so it took me like 4 weeks. I resisted for about 4 weeks, and then I ordered it. And I have to say, man, it's amazing. It really is. However, I can't recommend it because of the price. You have to really, you need to have that kind of nerdiness, I would say, to really want to reproduce, flight to a very high level of detail. Feeling the aircraft with a force feedback, just like the real aircraft. If it's not in trim, you have to continuously pull on the yoke or push on the yoke. And that force remains until you get the aircraft trimmed, right?
Right.
That's on the next level. But that's what I have right now, Brunner yoke. Then I have, of course, some FCUs. I have MCDUs, FMS. Some of those have been sponsored by the manufacturers, but if I look at the development there right now, I talked about the Scalarchi A320 FCU that costs 800, 900 pounds or something, I think.
Yeah, it's expensive.
And that region, so that's expensive, right? But prices, so competition has really now edged up, and I was surprised to see Winwing now join the arena for the commercial flight sims with their products, and I have the FCU there as well. Very nice and very affordable prices. And again, great for us flight simmers. Prices coming down, make it more affordable, and help to increase the immersion again.
Yeah, it's interesting on the Winwing one. I think they surprised a lot of people at FS Expo with some of the prices they were talking about. I had an opportunity to sort of do a little touch and feel. Are you going to confuse it with the Scalarchi one? No, but it had everything you needed to be at a very, very, very competitive price point. And similar, I thought, with the intro price for the mini FCU, control panel for the A322. Again, just seeing new benchmarks and new options. And we've seen a lot of excitement from some people we know about, particularly about the FCU and McDo's available and coming, either available or coming from Winwing or some other producers.
Yeah. Now we get to the point where, go ahead, Felix, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it comes down to, and I think you said it best, you're going to garner immersion from different things. For me, I think the most immersive experience you can have in flight sim, right? And don't worry, this is a small digression, but you'll see when I circle back. The most immersive experience you can have for me is being on a network, live ATC in a shared cockpit environment. So there are only rare places to get that. My point being is that the add-on is in the computer, right? Like I'm not physically next to you in a fixed-base procedural trainer working on that. And so, we kind of talk about Scalarchi versus Winwing CDU. Even for the hardcore simmer, I don't think it's going to be a problem that like the touch and feel is not the same as the McDo. I don't know who makes it is it Thales that makes all the stuff for Thales or however you pronounce it, or they just do the and so like you're not going to know the difference between that Scalarchi or a oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the company name. That you've got some of their products. Dulles, sorry, not Winwing. No, it's not Winwing is the competitor. I'm thinking about oh my gosh, wow, my brain just decided it had a leave of absence right there. So
Thrustmaster, what else?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the older kind of legacy people? Stuff.
Flight Deck Solutions.
Not Cockpit Master. Yes, Flight Deck Solutions. Thank you. Yes. There we go. Okay. Now my brain has decided to the neuron firing is working now. But no, it's not like Flight Deck Solutions, right? But I think for somebody like me, that $130 price point is fantastic, and it's going to do everything I needed to do. it's going to be a CDU. Like it doesn't need to run on its own separate computer. It doesn't need to do its own thing. It's going to be a CDU. I'm going to be able to use it for what I need to use it for. Same with the MCP, right? I don't need it to be ripped out from a Boeing 737 NG for me to get the immersion. And that was kind of the point I was going for. And I think Black Box, you're absolutely spot on when you say that immersion is from different things. And I think that even for the hardcore simmer, the WinWing products are going to be just fine when it comes to the immersion piece.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really going to enhance a lot of people's experiences. And I think this is kind of a byproduct of just, because, before Microsoft Flight Simulator, a lot of these companies weren't even trying. Like there were no Honeycomb mid-market, price. There was none of this stuff that existed. And I was, one of the questions I was going to ask you kind of leading into that is like, what is your favorite simulator product right now? And I think I know the answer, but, and then the follow-up question is going to be, do you think that Microsoft Flight Simulator has been a net negative or net positive to the hobby?
The second part of the question is easy to answer. It has a huge positive impact regarding flight simming. It's brought in so many new flight simmers. We talk millions now. If you look at P3D times or FSX times, right, it's a fraction of that. And like you said, because of that huge inflow of new flight simmers, it's become so huge, that market, that a lot of new players come into the arena and try to profit from it, which in the end helps competition. It helps bring prices down, lead to better products. So definitely, that's a huge bonus. Regarding the most realistic flight simulator. So one thing I've criticized right from the start with Microsoft Flight Sim was that they're focused on too much on the visual side, which I appreciate. I love the visual side in Microsoft Flight Sim. It's just lacking certain basic stuff with aerodynamics, with inertia. To put it kind of bluntly, it doesn't matter if you fly a Cessna or an A300. You always have a feeling when you try to pitch up, pitch nose down, it reacts the same. Which it shouldn't, right? So either the add-on maker themselves find an external way to dampen the inputs, and some of those have done a great job. If they don't, then you're going to really feel the inaccuracies in that regard. And it's a shame that the developers of Microsoft Flight Simulator Sobo didn't put that in right from the start. So as a basic underlying simulator platform. So now we have the position where a lot of add-on makers have to do something on the outside to simulate the behavior of the real aircraft. And then, like I said, they're doing a good job of it in parts, but it costs time and money to do so. X-Plane is aerodynamically a lot better as a platform. They have overdone a few things, but overall, judging from a real-world pilot standpoint, I can definitely say that X-Plane feels more alive, feels more realistic when you fly it. It's lacking visuals, obviously, although those have become better as well now. But there, the big plus is shared flight. And I've done a couple of shared flights now with the latest versions, and man, are they fun. They are so much fun. That being so reliable with the connections, a few issues with synchronization these days. And like you've mentioned as well, there's just a new level flying along with your buddy, who can see what you're doing and see how you mess up the landing and so on in real time, right? It adds some pressure, right? Or some good laughs. I mean, that's the end. That's what it's there for, right? And enjoy the hobby together. P3D is outdated. Unfortunately, P3D has never really caught on again after the release of Microsoft Flight Sim. So they're stuck where they are at the moment, and I don't see any big improvements coming from their side. So big hope now lies on Microsoft 2024 with regards to a better underlying model of the aerodynamics and the inertia stuff. And if they deliver, man, good times coming for us for sure.
Yeah.
But I still hope that X-Plane can improve visually and performance wise, because I'd hate to see the point where we only have Microsoft Flight Simulator, because I don't know if that's a good thing to have, again, a monopoly.
It's not.
In that
It's
arena.
not.
It's
yeah, it's something Felix and I talk about quite a bit. It's not great to have monopoly, but plainly Microsoft Flight Simulator is the 800-pound gorilla, and so we do need, and they made a huge commitment to it. When you look at what guys like Jorg and Seb are talking about doing, and the number of additional teams from different developers that they've brought into the process, it's obvious they want to make the next version into a real generational step forward. But as you correctly pointed out, well, what does that actually translate to some of the very, very basics? Good question. I don't know. I mean, you look at some of the things they're trying to do is, say, a hot air balloon. Well, I guess if you're working on the physics to make that work, or different kinds of other kinds of flying vehicles, does that imply that you're working on to make some of those go, that they're going to have positive impacts on the other more core pieces, whether it's, as you said, the Cessna or the A320 or whatever their base airplanes are? I think it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, it's also interesting because of, if you talk to developer Phoenix, let's say, right, they spent, I think, over a year trying to get that engine model working correctly. So that it has realistic values. And there's a lot of other things with flight dynamics and so on. It's a shame. It just costs so much time and resources for these little companies, to get the aircraft into the Microsoft Flight Sim platform. So hopefully things will improve with 2024. I think we can remain optimistic. But for me, going forward, I'm definitely going to try to balance things out between X-Plane and Microsoft.
Interesting. So, and I have seen in X-Plane that there are plenty of developers who've had to kind of work their own models too. And I know Toto, for example, is working on sort of a full external flight model, but it's supposed to be with the concept of it being sim agnostic. And I guess that's a different approach, because then he's saying, well, I can be wherever I need to be, and the sim's my scenery generator. And that I can see that has its pluses too, if you can make that work.
I mean, I talked to him, and I in the beta, the public beta, and it seems like he was more, at least from him, directly from his mouth, it seems that it's more a business thing, and I could see that. By the way, it's just it's one guy. I don't know if that's their main bread and butter. I have the sense that a lot of the X-Plane people, and even a lot of the Microsoft people, still, this is very much a hobby where you're developing in part-time and you have a real job. Typically. But I got the sense from Toto that, like, in that conversation, or at least in his comment, that it's more a business decision to make it sim agnostic, because he doesn't want to be tied specifically to Laminar. And it's that, you can see, we could sit here and read the tea leaves and do whatever, but I think that, at the end of the day, I don't want to see X-Plane go. I think it's a great sim. I've recently got back in the Challenger. I think that's a fantastic aircraft. I think that there are some things that I've noticed, especially with 12.1, that I think they've improved it a lot. But back to what you were saying, Black Box, I just don't know if Laminar's ever going away. They've been here since I've been simming. And you've seen them grow up too as well. And I just don't think they were there when I started. They're here now. I think they're just going to continue on. I think they have enough of a hardcore base that is also very anti-Microsoft Flight Simulator, and that I think that they're going to continue on and still be successful. And I think there are going to be, there are streamers like yourself, and there are other people that have that kind of opinion that, yes, we love what Microsoft Flight Simulator has done, but, this is my preference. And then, people who are investigating the newer simmers, they're going to be like, oh, well, okay, yeah, they've got this great product over here. Maybe I try this out. And, it's still going to bring new users. So I just don't see Laminar going away. That's my opinion. But.
No.
Laminar also has commercial contracts, and they got a mobile app. Yeah. So, there's some other elements in there that are a little different. But yeah, it would be a shame if they went away, but I wouldn't say they've had their best run in the last year and a half versus MSFS. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, and interesting comments I get from time to time when I stream X-Plane 12. People saying, "Oh, your sim looks great." Well, okay, yeah, it took a bit of effort with the orthos and so on, but they've done a good thing with the lighting effects now. And so now people are saying, wow, even people say, is this Microsoft? And no, it's actually X-Plane, right? So, hopefully the future will show that they make it easier for the implementation of these orthos, or even deliver their own orthos at some point. We'll see, yeah.
And you mentioned P3D, and I've sort of gone into I sort of take the view that P3D is kind of it's basically become a legacy sim now, and that's fine. There's still people who are using it, and heck, I was running it up until a few weeks ago, so I could get ready for the 777 by reviewing the 777 and so on. And Concorde was a fun release last year. I know you flew it, and Felix and I did too. But it did beg the question. I was just sort of curious, since you've had a past association with them. I know you're not working with them now, but the one big P3D developer that is yet to appear in Microsoft Flight Simulator is, of course, FS Labs, and they've said they're working full steam ahead on MSFS. I wonder what your thoughts are about what they might do, or how you think they might fare, assuming they bring some of the products that we know they make into Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yeah, I have zero contacts now with FS Labs, and they always been very secretive, in their developments, and that's definitely interesting, speculating on what they could potentially bring out into Microsoft Flight Sim. Now, the thing is, my argument has always been that they have a reputation that they can lose, and that is, with the high level fidelity they brought out with the FS Labs, the A320 series and P3D. People would expect that same fidelity in Microsoft Flight Sim. And just we mentioned, there are some basic underlying things that make it very difficult to produce that kind of fidelity in Microsoft Flight Sim. If you want to get that on the same level as in P3D. I'm not a programmer. I don't know exactly how much programming that would take. But again, if they come and bring out, let's say, the A320 Neo, which we don't really have, I think, in Microsoft Flight Sim just yet. Maybe XLR version or something, right? Just purely speculating here. I do not know. So something that's, it's there in form of A320 series, but it's not there yet, in the version type. But it would have to be on the same quality level as we've seen it in P3D. And that's the key, really. There's other speculation about an A330 from them coming out. And again, if that should come out, again, people will look for the same level fidelity. If they don't deliver that, then there's going to be disappointment. And I think that's their little problem they have at the moment.
Yep, they're a mountain to climb.
But personally, I really wish them success because the more high quality add-on makers we have, the better for us, because that means more good products coming to the Flight Sim world for us.
And since you fly the 787 now, did you have any reaction to Bluebird's announcement that they're going to make a 787?
I wasn't too excited about that. I'm going to have to look into how detailed it will be. The thing is, for me, aircraft that I fly in real life, I have my own kind of bar that I want to see being met to a certain extent, right?
Sure.
So I don't know. It would have to be a very good add-on. What I am excited about, though, is the flight vectors. 777 is already looking very promising. So they are also making a 787. So that's actually more what I'm looking into, hoping that that will come out at some point for X-Plane 12. Because if that's the same level fidelity with regards to failures, the system simulation and so on, and that's something that I could work very deeply with because of my real-world ties.
Are you working with Flight Factor at all on it, or are you just observing from the wings, so to speak?
I've been given the pre-release version of the 777 to try out. I've given them some feedback, but I'm not officially tied with them and not officially a beta tester, and I've not seen anything regarding the 787 yet. So I'm going to wait patiently until I get contacted to see if I can help out at some point.
Sounds good. We have really chewed your ear hard today, my friend. But I think that we are, as you said before we came on, you could talk about this stuff all day, and indeed, many of us do, at least in part, so to speak. Yeah. But we were very, very thankful for you joining us today. And we'd love to have you on again. And I'll tell you this much: Felix loves the 742, and I stare at it and struggle most times. But we should put together the shared cockpit flight of that one of these days. And go out there and take it somewhere, because it's a lot of fun.
Yep. Yeah,
you did that for CTP. That was.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for having me. Give me a platform to tell my stories, because my wife doesn't really want to listen to these stories anymore. So
what spouse does, though? That's the reality.
Yeah.
What spouse?
So she gets So I have a platform. Talking about these experiences that I've made in real life, and it's a great community. Flight Sim community is special. It can be challenging from time to time, but overall, I just love the whole flair, the excitement, and the emotions that come with each and every add-on that comes out. So great to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your tutorials, by the way, on the A320. Those helped me a lot. Boeing guy, and so I'm going to ask: Airbus or Boeing?
Yeah, so
we had to have one more, didn't we?
Regularly. So the thing is, how do I answer that in a most neutral way? So I've had the pleasure to work on both platforms, Boeing and Airbus, and I will always say, in the end, Boeing is a kind of an older aircraft to work on, but hand flies beautifully. So it doesn't matter if it's a 737, 747, which I loved flying. It flies really nicely. But even now with the 787 and the fly-by-wire system, it flies really well. It's a joy to fly. The A320 now, here's something that gets people upset when I say this, but as much as I've loved working on it as a workplace, it being so reliable and comfortable, I never ever got so emotionally attached to it compared to a Boeing aircraft. I don't know what it is. Maybe you have a car that you attach to emotionally or whatever. You can maybe relate. So flying a Boeing aircraft has always had me emotionally attached. Airbus, good aircraft, nice, but hand flying it never really convinced me that well. So that's the truth.
Well, there you have it, folks, for the next for your next Airbus versus Boeing debate. But thank you so much. It's been really
thank you so
really
much,
fun time.
Black Box.
Please come back, and if you want to come back at a point where Black Box is not perhaps as anonymous as you are now, we'd love to have you then too. And
thanks so much for the invitation.
We'll definitely do that.
And and I'll take you up on the shared flight in the 747. Will be fun. I'm sure we got lots of time to talk about stuff on that flight as well.
Absolutely, we'll definitely do that. Felix, I'll have to go back and double check that FE panel. Anyway,
I'll just be the flight engineer. I'll make it easy for you.
Okay, good.
That's a really easy one.
I can be the first officer. I'll work the radio. Thank you very much.
the gear and flat bitch. Yeah.
Right. INS. I can tweak that. Thank you. All right. Well, Felix, we've come to another session. We thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much, guys. It was an enlightening interview. It was a great interview. Black Box did not disappoint. I didn't think he was going to disappoint, and it was a great interview, great guest. So
this. And thank you all for sticking with us on this one. In that we are not live, so if you put your comments down below, we'll happily try to answer those. And as always, if you enjoyed it, subscribe, hit the like button, all the standard YouTube nonsense. But thanks everyone, and we'll see you all next week.
The next one.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. And now, as per usual, comes the technological challenge of playing us out.